The term midwit was originally coined, I believe, by the internet personality Vox Day. He described the midwit as someone who has above average intelligence, but just slightly above average. Because the midwit has just slightly above average intelligence, they're constantly in a position of insecurity. The midwit is just smart enough to know that they're not the smartest person in the room, just intelligent enough to know that they're missing something bigger and more important. For those of average or lower intelligence, this kind of thing just passes them by. It's a realization that they never come to, and frankly, it's usually not that important to their life. They focus on something that is far more significant. But the midwit's defining feature often becomes this lack of ability to reach the level of intelligence that they wish they had. They're just smart enough to know what they're missing out on. Because the midwit is always reaching for something they can never quite grasp, they become incredibly insecure. They often become obsessed with looking for every opportunity to express their intellectual superiority. In the end, they know that they're kind of faking being high intelligence, and so they're always worried about being found out, always worried about being shown up. And so they are always desperately seeking any opportunity to put down those who are average or below average intelligence in the hopes that no one will realize that the midwit never quite measures up. The midwit is always hoping to achieve the status that high intellect would bring, and so they often put themselves in awkward situations where their attempts become obvious. It's like the new money person trying to look old money, or the unpopular person who happens to get invited to a party and they're trying to prove themselves the entire time. It becomes very clear to the people who are very naturally of that status who this person is. The midwit is the kind of person who corrects a grammatical error on social media and feels like they've slam dunked their opponent. And this is why the progressive worldview is so often very attractive to midwits. Progressivism often gives midwits low-cost opportunities to look superior to what are considered the common folk in a public setting. As an example, the left loves to use code switching. They love to use different definitions constantly for the same idea in an attempt to trip up and embarrass and look down on people who are not constantly up on their jargon. This is perfect for a midwit because a midwit doesn't have the intellectual firepower to actually think through these things and define these things and explore these ideas, but at a very low cost to them, they can constantly update themselves on jargon. As long as they stay plugged into the jargon, they're smarter than the average person on the internet or the average person across the water cooler, and that's all that really matters. As long as they get to correct someone, as long as they get to follow up and say, well, actually, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that opportunity where they get to look down on someone because they don't know the jargon, they don't know the lingo. That's a classic midwit move. A large amount of the midwittery that we see today can really be attributed to people looking at low-resolution versions of ideas that are taught to children and then attempting to criticize them as if they were full adult conceptions of the same idea. You see, anyone who's spent any amount of time around children, raising children, teaching children, they understand that when you explain something to a child, you have to give them a simplified caricature of what you're trying to explain. Often when you're talking to children, you have to explain very complicated concepts. There are actually some very, very complicated ideas that we as humans have to grasp at a basic level to function even as young kids. And when you're a parent or a teacher and you're attempting to explain these things, even as you simplify them, even as you present them in a low-resolution way, you realize that you're often presenting something that is, at points, false. There are things about what you are presenting that are incorrect. But if you attempted to complicate them in a way that would make them more correct, the child would simply be unable to grasp the concept. And so trade-offs have to be made. You have to teach the child the wrong thing before you can teach them the right thing, which sounds ridiculous, but if you have any experience in this area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You do it all the time. What you're teaching the child may not be technically true, but it is functionally true. And that's enough until later on when they become more sophisticated and can learn more sophisticated models and update what they've learned, or at least that's what they're supposed to do. But because we have so encouraged this culture of deconstructing everything, because we've taught every kid that deconstructing and analyzing everything is the most important thing you can do. It's what will get you the immediate pat on the head. It is the skill that everyone has to have and is most rewarded, especially in public schools. Midwits are constantly under the impression that breaking down these low-resolution, childlike representations of complex ideas is just the height of intellectual superiority. They love it. They can't get enough of it. It's like crack cocaine. And this is why Midwits love to announce things like, well, God isn't like what I was taught when I was 5, so God doesn't exist. Or America wasn't founded the way I was taught when I was 5, so America's evil. Instead of being told, hey, these are actually really complex things that are challenging and you have to learn and grow and expand, instead they're rewarded for dismantling this child's toy that they were handed in elementary school, and they just love it. They think that they're absolutely Einstein for doing this. And it only gets worse because when they get to college, this behavior is increasingly rewarded, especially as the number of people going to college in this country skyrockets. They've basically just become midwit factories. If you'd like to get the full story, you can check out my video on elite overproduction in American universities. A card with a link to that video should be showing up on your screen right now. But long story short, these people were promised that if they went to school and got the degree, they would become the ruling elite, they would be the Fortune 500 CEOs, they would be the lawyers and the doctors, and it turns out actually they can't even keep a job at Starbucks. These people who have slightly higher than average intelligences, which is great, there's nothing wrong with that, they would have in previous times been very happy contributing members of society if they had just been doing something like managing a store. They would have had a family, they would have had a career, they would have gone to church on Sunday, they would have lived a fulfilling life. But instead, they've been trained to deconstruct everything that actually gives life meaning. And of course, because these people are constantly seeking ways to look more intelligent than everyone else, they love overly complex theories that over-explain an obscure truth. They often embrace the progressive worldview because it offers them so many of these overly complex explanations, which allows them to ignore an obvious and painful truth that the people who are dumber than them but are able to embrace simple ideas and simple realities are often far happier and lead far more productive and fulfilling lives. Instead of embracing reality, midwits are often stuck in a meaningless job with tens of thousands of dollars in debt so they could acquire a diversity management degree. They sit childless and lonely in their apartments, drinking themselves to death, doting on their pets, trying to dunk on flat earthers and evangelical Christians online to make themselves feel intellectually superior, to feel in the end that their choices are justified. And don't misunderstand, the midwit phenomenon is in no way relegated only to the left. These people do show up across the political spectrum, but with the extremely progressive university system being the primary breeding ground of our current midwit infestation, it's not hard to see why the majority of them are so consistently drawn to that ideology. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please go ahead and hit like. If you're new here and you want to hit subscribe, now's a great time to do so. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter or contribute to my work, the links to do so are in the description down below. The channel broke 1,000 followers a couple weeks ago, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been coming by, liking the videos, sharing the videos, subscribing. You guys are so great. I'm very grateful to you. Thanks again, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.